Hey guys, welcome to the Pilot Light, a new webinar series presented by gngHub, where real estate agents refer and earn with Georgia Natural Gas. Remember, both you and your clients can receive up to $120 when they sign up with GNG. Visit gng.com/gngHub to learn and earn more. This webinar will be recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel, and we'll also push it out to email or push it out by email to everyone who is registered. But be sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by visiting bit.ly/GNGYT. And if you're not already a member, you can join for free at gng.com/GNGHub. For the materials presented in today's webinar, you will be able to get all of those in the hub as well. So be sure that you set up your free membership and check that out once we get the recording up and all that good stuff. With GNG by Georgia Natural Gas, it pays to refer. Receive $120 for you and your client when you refer them to Georgia Natural Gas. For details, visit gng.com/GNGHub. Each month, we'll bring you a real estate industry expert to help you grow your own business by providing their personal tips and best practices needed for success. I'm your host, Lee Adkins, and I am pleased to introduce Katie Lance.
Hey there, so happy to be here today.
Awesome, thanks Katie. Appreciate you being on. We altered our time a little too because you're West Coast, so we keep people on their toes.
Thank you.
Why don't you give us just a little bit of background on your really awesome journey and kind of how you got into what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I run a social media marketing firm in the San Francisco Bay Area. I work side by side with my husband. He's my partner in life, partner in business. And really our passion is to help agents and brokers get smarter about social media. We really believe that, social media is not the magic bullet. It's not the end all and be all, but when done right, it can make a huge difference in your business. And before we ran our social media marketing company, before that, I worked for Inman News for many, many years, was their social media director and chief strategist. And then before that, worked at a local real estate company here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's been fun to really combine a lot of my past experience. And then as things grow and change, as they always do, it's been really fun to be able to serve this community in a really, I think, really important way, especially nowadays, more than ever.
Right, for sure. And you were definitely really early in the social game too. It's funny now, I think people may or may not realize that, but you were definitely on the forefront of when social was coming up, when Zillow was the new thing and Facebook was, just starting to be a thing. So it is fun to see that evolution of kind of where that's all gone. And I love that you focus on that because, I've followed you and known you for a good while now, and you put out great content. Maybe this is a good time. You want to give a quick synopsis of the no tweet left behind concept?
Yeah, absolutely. That started many moons ago, this idea of, especially on Twitter. And I think this is something that I think applies not just to Twitter, but any social platform you're on, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it is. And this idea of if someone tags you in a post, if you get mentioned, if someone likes your comment or interacts with you, you should respond. And it started with Twitter back in the day when I just felt like, if someone's going to take the time to tweet me or retweet my content, I'm going to respond. And sometimes that response is just a little smiley face emoji, or maybe it's a comment that says, thank you so much. And I've really carried that philosophy. Honestly, it's probably been 8 or 10 years now, to be honest. And it's something that I really believe in my heart of hearts. I think it's almost the secret sauce. It might sound a little corny, but I think it makes a really big difference. When you take the time to not just put content out there, I mean, anybody can put content out there. The magic is in the engagement and the back and forth. And so, one of the things, I'll just give a quick tip that we try to do every day is when we're posting content and we get, a few comments or however many comments, not just go through and like all those, but actually try to have a conversation. And that engagement, that back and forth, I think is so valuable. That's where you build relationships.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny. I've said this about you. I don't know if I've ever said it to you, but like you put the social in social media, right? Like
thank you.
It's literally the whole point and it kills me because I do see a lot of real estate people who will post something and it's kind of like a push, like look at this new listing or whatever.
Right.
And people will comment and they'll say like, hey, that looks really nice, or hey, whatever. And if I don't see responses to that, then, you're not doing it right if
Yeah.
that's the case, So cool. Well, I really do appreciate you being on. You truly are the expert. So we'll go ahead and dive into the slides. I know we have a lot of things that we want to cover. Um, and I think, the first is like, how can you adapt, during the current scenario? Like what type of messaging or, what do you feel that is a smart way to not just be like, hey, look at me, or hey, everything's great, but also be engaging and interesting?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you started with this question because we're living through obviously unprecedented times, which is becoming a really big cliche because I think everyone is saying that, but it's true. And, I don't think 2020 was the year anyone quite expected. And so the reality is, the elephant in the room is we're in the middle of a global pandemic. There's so much going on in the world. We're in the middle of an election year, and there's so many issues that have popped up this year around social injustice, and there's a lot going on in the world today. And so I get a lot of agents and brokers who will come to me and say, well, can I still talk about business? Like how do I still talk about business? And so my answer to that is I think it's fine, of course, to talk about business. I know for a lot of folks, depending on what market you're in, the market is really strong in a lot of areas throughout the country, throughout the world. But I also think it's important not to be tone deaf, and I think we're in a really unique spot where we want to be respectful of what we say. I really believe that we are leaving a digital legacy. We're leaving these sort of digital breadcrumbs that our kids and grandkids and great grandkids will be able to see and read about us more so than we ever knew about our grandparents and great grandparents. And so I think it's important in these times to have an opinion, to lean into who you are, as I've often said, but I think do so in a really respectful way. And I think it's also important for agents and brokers more than ever to really address how things are in their market and how they're working with clients in a really safe way, especially by getting on video or Facebook Live or Instagram Live. I'm sure we'll talk more about that here today. But with everything happening in the world, we're not with our clients as much face to face, or if we are, we're doing so at a safe distance. And so being able to get on camera on a regular basis and really talk truthfully about what's happening and how you're working with clients in a safe way. If you're, buyers or sellers need to buy or sell, what that looks like, and I think coming from a place of caring and education, and serving, it's amazing when you give how much comes back to you. And so those are just a few things I think, especially right now, that authenticity more than ever, it's more important than ever before,
Right.
showing up, making sure you're not automating everything, things like that.
Right. For sure. No, that totally makes sense. It's funny because, we've always either done or kind of joked about like the listicle things, like what are the 5 best restaurants in your area or those sort of things. But those are even more relevant now. I've seen some
Yeah.
agents who are, buying gift cards to local restaurants and giving them out to past clients and just things like that are just really, really smart. I think the thing that's hard, and this is probably a little sort of off topic, but not really, but I definitely would love to get your thoughts on this. Like, you know, more than ever, it's time to sort of differentiate yourself, but also not reinvent. Like
Yeah.
people don't need to necessarily go crazy. I mean, I don't know how many new email newsletters I've been added to in the last 2 months now that people have time to get around to their newsletter. But from like that kind of old slash new content. I mean, are there any other examples that you're seeing of that, of people really supporting community or past clients or whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of power right now in just the one-to-one also, reaching out to people privately through texting, through Facebook Messenger. I know we saw a lot of that happen back in March and April, but I think we should do that, periodic check in with those same people again. Hey, how are you doing? And I think especially when you come at it from a place of not necessarily always about business, but just at a human level, checking in. I know, you reached out to me, which is awesome. Just say, hey, how you doing? How's everything going? And I think when you come from that place, people can tell. It makes a really big difference. And I would also say, to your point, I love that you brought up the idea of talking about local businesses. I think right now, one of the best things we can do is shine a light on others in our community. And the reality is there's a lot of small businesses in our communities, salons, restaurants, our favorite, mom and pop boutiques that are really hurting right now. And unfortunately, some of them aren't going to make it, through this year, but as much as we can support them, I really think real estate agents and brokers are the heart of their community. And there's so many ways we can support them, from financially, as you suggested, maybe buying a few gift cards, sending them to your clients, or really taking it a step further and maybe inviting them onto a Facebook Live where you interview them and highlight their business and get them to tell their story and maybe share an offer. We've seen some agents put together really simple PDF guides where they've said, hey, here's the top, my favorite top 10 restaurants in downtown that are open right now. And here's some of the specials they have. So I think there's a lot of ways to get creative, but when you can shine the light on someone else, first of all, it builds a great relationship. They're so thankful for that. Second of all, it's a great piece of content. And third of all, it's also a great way to build your network, because 9 times out of 10, if you highlight a local business, they're going to share that post, that Facebook Live, that video with their audience as well.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's definitely true. And in fact, that kind of takes us right into the next topic, which is doing virtual open houses, or we'll also say virtual showings. What have you been seeing? I think you actually did a couple of webinars on this. I know they were pretty popular. So any tips on virtual showings or open houses it would be awesome.
Yeah, we've done a ton of training over the last few months. We just really saw, as things started to shift and, the real estate market, there was all this conversation about, are they an essential business? Are they not? And there was sort of, a lot of kind of hubbub around that. And then what it would look like, right? How do you sell a house during a pandemic, right? This is something no one's ever encountered before. And I guess the good news is that we have the tools available to show homes virtually. And so I think there's a couple things that we've seen that work really well. The first is if an agent or broker is able to actually go to the house. And it really depends, depends on what market area you're in. I always say double check with your manager, your broker, because every area is different. But if you're able to go to a property, I mean, what's great is we're all walking around with these amazing devices, right? And to be able to just broadcast on Facebook Live, give people a sneak peek into that home. And if you're not at the property, you can do the same thing from your home office. We've seen some agents who are part of our Get Social Smart Academy who have done Zoom calls, and they broadcast it to Facebook Live. They're in their home office, but they're talking about a property across town. But because they're using Zoom, they're able to screen, kind of like what we're doing here, right? We're in opposite parts of the country, but agents are able to screen share pictures of the property. I had an agent recently. She was like, let me walk you through this great kitchen, and she pulls up this beautiful picture she has of the kitchen, and then she's talking about the backyard. And is it the same as being in the house? No, of course it's not the same, but to give people a little bit of a sneak peek. And one tip I would just give anyone listening is when it comes to a virtual open house, the more you do them, the easier it gets. I mean, the first time or two you do it, it feels a little awkward and you're talking to your camera, and it's not necessarily, I think, a natural experience. And so just like anything, the more you do it, the easier it gets. I would also say one of the best ways we're seeing agents and brokers get leads from virtual open houses is they're not giving everything away. It's not like you're showing the whole enchilada. You don't have to give away the spoiler to the movie or the TV show. So my tip is, when you're doing a virtual open house, share maybe 3 to 5 of your favorite features, but at the end, have some sort of call to action that says, hey, if you'd like more information, comment below or send me a message.
Right.
And it's just like a great movie trailer, right? A great movie trailer doesn't give away the ending to the movie, but you want more information. So
right.
Those are a few.
No, that's great. And it's funny, I've always kind of made that argument for like heavy virtual tours too. It's like the goal is still to get them to want to see the house. So it's not, we don't have to show every closet, let's still, plus, nobody wants to watch a 45-minute video of you like talking about every feature. No matter how great you are, they still don't want that.
No.
But no, that's really great. And I love that advice. I think something I find myself saying a lot about this business is a lot of times that it's simple but hard. Like it's hard to just make it that simple,
Yes.
Answer a couple of questions, say, hey, this house is great because it's got a pool, or it's got a huge pantry, or it's got an office on the main floor, things that people are thinking about and looking at right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely interesting. So this kind of goes right in tandem with that. Like, how important is video right now? I mean, like I guess I don't know if we need to compare it to pre-COVID, but like how do you think video, and obviously going live, Facebook, YouTube, whatever is playing in now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really critical, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And honestly, this isn't a new conversation, as you know. I mean, you and I have been to conferences for a long time, and for a long time, people have been talking about the power of video and Facebook Live and getting on camera. And I know a lot of people feel nervous. We don't always like how we look or how we sound. We might get a tickle in our throat, like I'm about to. So I'm going to take a sip of water.
Totally good. Totally good.
See, that's what happens.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's more important than ever before. And I think one of the reasons for that is video tells the story of what does it feel like to work with you?
Yeah.
What does it feel like to work with you? And a lot of times I'll go to an agent or broker's Facebook business page, and it doesn't matter if they're in Atlanta or California or anywhere. And I see kind of the same thing. I see listings, I see your open houses. But what a lot of times is missing is, what do you sound like? What are you all about? What do you stand for? And I think that's really the power of video in a big, big way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because obviously the going saying with that is like, they're going to see you anyway at some point. So, they're going to see you anyway. So why not? But it does. I mean, honestly, it establishes authority as well. I mean, it establishes,
Absolutely.
A, I know what I'm talking about. B, I'm a real person.
Mm-hmm.
And C, I do think it makes you a little more approachable. I'm sure that you and I met via social or a video or a webinar that you did or something before we met in real life. Like I'm
Probably,
positive.
probably. And I would say too, to go back to what we talked about a second ago, as far as virtual open houses, like I said, I think video is more important than ever before. And one of the things that we see tend to work really well when it comes to video is not just the facts, because we can find the facts anywhere. I can find the facts of a listing anywhere. But if you can pull out a story, keep people curious, it's a little bit more of an advanced tip. But one of the things we're seeing agents and brokers start to do really well is they will go to their clients and say, when you moved here, what's the one thing you loved about this house? Or now that you've been here 20 years, like, what's your favorite thing about living in this area? Or tell me the story behind that kitchen remodel. And if you can kind of pull out a couple of those stories, then when you're promoting a video or a Facebook Live or your virtual open house, you can say, hey, tune in Sunday at 1 o'clock for my virtual open house. I can't wait to tell you guys the story of this kitchen. Right.
Right.
And now people are like, what story? Right. Like it doesn't work every time you do a video, obviously, but just kind of thinking about, is there an opportunity to tell a story, to share an opinion, and people resonate with that. I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're really, really right. And it's funny, even a year or two ago, I started thinking, I'm like, video is like, everybody who's going to do it is doing it. There's no real opportunity to be like new and strong in video. And I was really wrong. There's still plenty of room in the video space to get in. So how can people, like, let's just say that we've got people on that have never shot a video. And I mean, I agree with you. Like we walk around with a video camera all day, every day, but,
Right.
but I also know that it is hard for somebody to just go from zero and say, okay, I'm going to look at this little box and talk at it. Like, how does somebody get started in video?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things, like you said, we all have it, but it can feel kind of daunting for people who maybe don't like to get on camera. I mean, there was quite a time I remember where it's, I didn't like how I looked, or I didn't like how I sounded. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And, I will never forget, I had a very good friend of mine many years ago, very lovingly tell me, she was like, Katie, that's how you look. And that's how you sound. So you got to get over it. And so that was part of it, I think, and that's part of it for a lot of people. But I also think a couple things definitely help. Part of it is getting into kind of a routine with video. I find that if you, instead of just like every once in a blue moon when you feel like it, or like the wind hits you, what I found made a huge difference is just integrating it into my schedule and actually making a commitment to publish a video. We started doing this about 3 years ago, where every Wednesday we have a new video come out. It's called the Get Social Smart Show. And it comes out every Wednesday. And just by saying, hey guys, I'm going to have a new video every Wednesday, that was like all the accountability I needed, right? Because when you tell people publicly, now you're going to do it. And so I think part of it is just getting some systems together. And I'll just give you a couple quick tips if that's okay. One of the things I really recommend is, if I'm going to sit down and do my hair and makeup and do one video, I might as well record like 3 or 4. So we do a lot of batch creating of content. I set aside about an hour or two every single month to batch create my videos for the previous month. And I can tell you, every month I'm like, okay, I've got so many other things I got going on, blah, 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 blah. But because I've set the time, it's in the schedule, it's going to happen. The other thing that makes a difference is getting into kind of a routine with what your videos are all about. So I like to have a little bit of a kind of I guess, a rhythm to my videos. If you watch any of my videos, there's like the beginning, right? Kind of like hooking people in. I introduce myself, and then I generally share a few tips, a few ideas, and then I wrap it up at the end. I've got some sort of call to action at the end. And I think following a similar format each time, so you're not always reinventing the wheel, build your confidence big time. And then the third thing I would say is talk about what you know. If I were to do videos about, I don't know, calculus or something, like that would be the worst videos ever. So start with what you're really confident talking about. Start with those questions that somebody could ask you at a dinner party, and you would you would have no problem talking about it. Those things that you think, oh my gosh, if I get asked that one more time, those types of questions, that type of content, you might even start by brainstorming, writing a list down of topics that come up all the time when you talk to clients or prospects. And when you talk to what you know, when you get yourself into a routine, and when you kind of, commit to putting out video on a regular basis, those three things can really help in a big, big way.
Yeah, and you're case in point on that. I don't know how many people follow or whatnot or connected to you, but they definitely should be. I mean, between your podcast, your just general content, I mean, your Twitter, your YouTube, like it's very impressive. And I'm sure that people could say, oh, well, she does this for a living, but that's how you got to be able to do this for a living, is by executing and doing it. And even when your podcast came out, like, it was great. I mean, I was such a fan. I was like, yes, podcast. I was like, that's the, I don't know, not a trifecta, quadfecta or whatever. Like,
Right.
now she's got a podcast. Now,
right. It's the one piece of content I hadn't done yet.
Right. And one thing I want to throw out, it was like, that was the last remaining piece.
It was.
Something I wanted to mention during this too is that, well, two quick things. Number one, when I first started doing any video at all, I was just doing video of my screen. And I did a session with somebody a couple of weeks ago where he actually presents his offers via, well, he technically uses BombBomb as the format, but it's video. So he'll go over the high points of the offer, go through the offer. And he made a great point, because you may have two decision makers and one may be the filter for the other. So when you can present that in a really clear way of going over the terms high level and then going through the document, it's totally brilliant. So we're not saying you have to go live on Facebook and have 10,000 people watch you. You can shoot a video on your phone and text it to your spouse and just be like, hey, is this good? Or, hey, do I look funny? Or should I wear a purple shirt or whatever? So we're not saying you have to go broadcast,
Exactly. And I love that you brought up that point, because there's a lot of video that can happen that's not necessarily public, for the whole world to see. I mean, some of the tips that I share, those are more of, if you're kind of publicly putting out a show, like a podcast or a video or whatever it might be. But I totally agree with you. We have a lot of folks who use BombBomb. That's a great tool. Or even just, they're taking quick video when they're at a property. I mean, if you are, let's say you're previewing property for your clients, because let's face it, if you're working with buyers, they're not going to go into every home. Like, the ones they actually go into most likely are the ones like they're really interested in. So you got to do that. You're going to do that heavy lifting. You're shooting maybe little videos or little clips. You might be FaceTiming. We have a lot of agents who FaceTime with their agents, or they do a private Facebook Live where it's just them and it's just their clients, and they're just like walking through a home. So I totally agree with you, Lee. There's a lot of video that's not necessarily public for the whole world to see, but that one-to-one is really powerful.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And somebody just had a really, really great question. Erica just asked, do you ever request content or ideas from your followers? Because she said she sometimes runs out of ideas. So, like, what's a way to get some more content ideas?
Yeah, no, I love that you asked that, Erica. Absolutely. I probably do that probably once or twice a year. A lot of times I'll go on just social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or maybe all of them. And I might say something like, what questions do you have about such and such, maybe a specific topic, or, hey, I'm working on my, my new video plan. My new, content plan. I'm just curious, what kind of, what type of training or what type of topics would you like to hear from me? So absolutely. I think it's great to reach out on social media. If you have an email list, and as Lee mentioned, if you've been working on your email list during this time, like, there's nothing wrong with sending out an email newsletter saying, hey, we're working on our content. And I would probably ask two things. I would say, number one, what type of, training or content or videos would you love to hear from me and get from me? And number two, where are you hanging out? Are you hanging out more on Facebook or Instagram or none of the above? That's fine. Like, I think that's a great way to do it. And one other thing, Erica, I would also say is, if you get stuck on content ideas, I would encourage you to think about who have you worked with over the last 6 to 12 months. Maybe even make a list of all your clients and prospects you've worked with over the last 6 to 12 months. And then think about the topics of conversation that came up with each one of those clients. And oftentimes, if you just take 10 or 15 minutes, kind of do a brainstorm, that'll really kind of help spark some ideas too.
Yeah, that's great. I think setting aside that time, it seems like it's kind of hard and daunting, but I think, we're not talking about hours. We're not talking about, you don't have to, leave the country and like go under the radar, take some time in the morning maybe and sketch out ideas or, for real estate agents, maybe even look at your emails. Like, what are the questions? What are the responses or the things that you're getting or that you're always telling clients, how does an inspection work? What are you seeing? And, but once again, it's funny, that kind of goes back to all the old school content, right? Just like that was always the thing before. Like, what are we going to blog about? Well, what do you say 300 times a year?
Right. And I would say too, when you create that kind of content, that kind of content, a lot of it's very evergreen or timeless. So, it kind of goes back to what we talked about with social media. What's great about that is now you have a piece of content that you could repurpose and repackage. And if you follow me on all of my social media channels, you'll see we do that a lot. I'm not going to if I take the time to create a video or podcast, that sucker gets shared out multiple times and multiple formats. But
I want to make a really important point, though. You also formatted appropriately for that platform. You don't have
it's not just like
that have the Twitter handle and There's definitely strategy to it.
Exactly.
But no, that's great. And that kind of leads us right into the next question of like, how can you, without a big budget, like how can you still leverage Facebook and or Instagram for free or, at least at a low cost?
Yeah. I think there's a ton of things that agents or brokers can do without even spending money on Facebook. Just a few things. There's so many different pieces to Facebook, right? You've got your personal profile, you've got your business page. Those two pieces, I think, alone there's a lot of things you could do. Your personal profile isn't, of course, supposed to be all about business, right? You don't want to spam all your friends with all your listings. But on your personal profile, one of my kind of oldie but goodie tips, this thing has been around forever, is on your personal profile, you can create lists of your friends. You can go into your friend list and organize your friends into private lists. Your friends aren't going to know they're on a list, but specifically for business, if you were connecting with maybe past clients or you've got prospects that you're friends with on Facebook, you may not be friends with all of them, and that's fine, but you can actually put them into a private list, which I think is one of the coolest things that you can do, because now instead of going on Facebook and looking at your 500 Facebook friends and what they had for breakfast and cat videos and political posts, you can go right to like your client list of 20 people and see what they're doing, see what they're talking about. And then you can take a few minutes to like, comment, interact with them. And that relationships, that's where the relationship building, can make a really big difference. So I love that. That's something we've been seeing for years and years that can make a really big difference. And then I would also say, when it comes to your business page, obviously your business page is going to be more about business, but we're, just like what we talked about a second ago, what's working really well on Facebook are videos and Facebook Live content. It's one of the best ways to kind of jumpstart your business page. If you find on your business page, you're getting like 1 like, 2 likes, one of them is your mom, right? If you're not getting a whole lot of traction, most likely it's because you're sharing someone else's content. You read some article on HGTV and you shared it out. And that type of content nowadays and on Facebook just doesn't get a whole lot of traction. Mark Zuckerberg talked about earlier this year, he said that the content that tends to get more traction in the newsfeed, the content that you see in your newsfeed, it's typically content that sparks a conversation. Content that sparks a conversation. So the best type of content for that, at least right now, is video content that you're uploading into Facebook, not necessarily sharing that YouTube link, because Mark Zuckerberg wants you to stay on Facebook. He doesn't want you to go to YouTube. So video you're uploading into Facebook, videos that has captions, and there's a free captioning service with Facebook. You can caption all your videos because most of us don't actually listen to a video. A lot of times we are reading the captions. Facebook Live now has automated captions. If you're live on Facebook, one of the new things that's rolling out to a lot of folks, I just recently got this on my account, and Facebook rolls things out in kind of phases, is again captions across your Facebook Live. So that type of content, totally free. Obviously takes a little bit of time, of course, to create some of that content. I would also say Facebook groups and Facebook Messenger. Again, they're free. They don't cost a whole lot of money. And this is also one of the things Mark Zuckerberg talked about. He said the future of Facebook is private. The future of Facebook is private. So as much as we post on our feed and everybody sees what we post, and obviously there's a place for that, there's also a place for kind of private conversations that happen in groups. So we see a lot of agents and brokers who manage a group. Maybe it's for their local community. Maybe it's a brokerage and they've got a group for their office. We have one agent who's in Southern California. He's got a local community group for his farm area that he farms. And he texted me recently. He's like, I'm killing it, Katie. He's like, not to brag, but because he's got this great local group and he's got other people contributing. It's a great way for him to build, kind of build that know, like, and trust factor. And then I would say the last piece of this is Facebook Messenger. Facebook Messenger is that place to reach out, to connect with people one-to-one. We talked about video earlier. You can send video messages one-to-one. You can send audio messages one-to-one. And so I think, all four of those pieces, your personal profile, your business page, groups, Messenger, there's so many opportunities there. And then once you get that, into play, then we can talk about ads, right? Because ads are a whole nother beast. But, lots of opportunity. And I would say the same thing with Instagram. I mean, you've got Instagram up on the screen here. So many great free opportunities between Instagram stories, Instagram TV, your feed, Instagram Live. Lots of opportunities to do stuff that doesn't cost a whole lot of money.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And I think, the only real difference with Instagram, if people want a quick tip on that, is choosing something like Linktree, possibly, just because, Instagram only allows you can't put a link in the post if it's not sponsored. Yeah. So that's why a lot of times, if people aren't familiar, you'll see the comment will say link in bio. And Linktree is a initially free or a freemium type service where you can it basically creates like a little website with buttons. Yeah. So if you need to have, instead of changing the link all the time, because if somebody sees your post from 6 months ago, that's no longer going to be the link in your bio.
Right.
You can have it's kind of like a business card, link to my site, link to my YouTube channel, link to more info about, Malibu homes or whatever that is. So, but I think that's great advice. I think a lot of people look for the easy button and if I just put $50 on this post, it'll be magic. But it's still going to be good content. So let's start with good content.
It has to start with good content. And I would also say too, Facebook ads have changed and Instagram ads have changed. Like, those advertising platforms used to be kind of the wild, wild west. And we used to be able to do all these great targeting options. And, for anybody in the US, who I would imagine is a big portion of the people watching, there's a lot more limitations because of some of the things going on with fair housing and just Facebook in general, really kind of cracking down on their Facebook ads. So you can still have a lot of success with Facebook ads, but it's a much more long-term, a little bit more costly endeavor. If they'll be a little bit more patient. So I really think it's important to set the groundwork first on all these things you can do organically, right, before you even spend money on ads.
And especially, I think, if you're a solo agent, which obviously we had a majority on who are on now, and really, like, if you're really running a brand or trying to feed a team, then that's a different strategy. But if we're looking at you just looking to better engage with your past clients and pick up a few new people or people from their sphere, then that's you probably really don't need to put money behind it, or not until you're comfortable not putting money behind it. So this is an area I admittedly am actually really bad and not knowledgeable about. So I'm really curious to hear you talk about this. Let's talk about stories. I guess Facebook stories first, and then Instagram.
Yeah.
Or Instagram story. Well, we'll follow the plan. Instagram first.
Yeah.
They were the original. So.
Sure. No, I am loving stories. So there's stories, for people who don't know. Stories are, there's Instagram stories, there's Facebook stories. They all kind of originally I guess, borrowed the idea from Snapchat. Snapchat kind of started it back in the day. But the idea is that it's content that's either photos or videos, short videos that are here today and they're gone in 24 hours. And I remember when I first heard that, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? I spend so much time on content. It's just going to disappear. And what I really realized, especially over the last probably year or two of really using stories and leveraging stories, is that what I think is really great about stories, there's a few things. First of all, they don't have to be perfect. You know, I think sometimes we are under this like pressure to make sure that everything we put out there is super professional, super polished. And, you know, I'm not saying don't be professional, but I think there's a little bit of vulnerability that comes through when things aren't totally polished. I also think Instagram stories and Facebook stories is a great way to take someone kind of behind the scenes. I often say it's like the story behind the story. So the difference between like your story and your feed, you know, your feed is like kind of your highlight reel, right? The feed is like the best of the best. So like, for example, let's say you have a new listing and you're going to do a virtual open house. Well, if you're going to do a virtual open house, you're probably going to put a couple great photos on Instagram or Facebook. You're going to have a nice little post about it. You know, it's going to be, you know, beautiful photos, which is great. Your story is going to be something like, hey guys, I'm so excited. I have an amazing listing coming on the market and I cannot wait to tell you guys the scoop about this house. You know, go into my feed. You can see all the photos. If you're curious about the virtual open house, I'm doing it this Sunday. Click the link in my bio. And it's a little bit of this like kind of taking people along on your journey, right? Like again, sort of like the story behind the story as you're getting a home ready for the market, or as you're, you know, out and about, or you're sharing something funny that happened with your kids or your pets, or you know, or as we're kind of going through this crazy time together. I also think the beautiful thing about stories is that because stories are so quick, and usually a story is many times 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 little clips that are kind of stitched together into a story that again disappears, is when someone comments on your story. So like, let's say for example, I do a quick story and someone comments. That comment is actually a private message that I get. It's a DM, a direct message. And which is very different than the feed, right? If I post to my Instagram feed or my Facebook feed, that's public. I mean, you know, maybe not, it's not public, but it's my friends can see it, right? And it becomes this like, this is my opinion, this is my listing, and then everybody comments, which is fine. However, there's something to be said about a story when you can say, well, what do you think? Message me. Or what are your thoughts about this? Send me a DM. And now what you have is you have this like private conversation that's happening. And that's where relationships are built. Relationships are built with like exactly what we talked about in the very beginning, right? Of like the whole no tweet left behind. It's like these one-to-one conversations that take time, that you can't really outsource to someone else because that's you, right? It'd be like outsourcing, like making phone calls to your clients, right? Like you're going to do that. You're the one that's going to show up. So it's these one-to-one conversations, and it's really powerful. So what we see are some of the agents and brokers that are leveraging this really well is, again, like you said, Lee, not just, hey, look at me, I've got another house, like I'm so great. Like it's more of highlighting people, taking people kind of behind the scenes, being interactive, saying, look, I'm out on tour today. What do you think? Do you like this kitchen or like this kitchen? You know, what are your thoughts? Or, oh my gosh, have you ever seen, like, check this out, you know? And that private one-to-one, you know, that's where business happens. If you want to know where, you know, how do you get business from social media? That's one big piece of it, is that private kind of messaging one-to-one. So that happens on Instagram. That also happens on Facebook. And so I would encourage, you know, agents and brokers who are kind of figuring out their strategy. You know, again, I think it's important to post in the feed, but that story piece of it, I think, is going to be a great opportunity to build that engagement and to build those relationships.
For sure. And I want to kind of reiterate that because I think what you said is really, really important. I mean, it's the goal is to start the real conversation. The goal is to create the one-to-one conversation. So, you know, to be honest with you, that changes my mind a little bit on stories too. If it's a way to kind of more easily tailor, and now that you say that, it makes total sense because it shows up as a message. It's like, so, or when you do it, when you respond to it, or it's like, hey, you were in so-and-so story, it is like a message. So it is creating that one-to-one. You know, we're trying to go, I mean, it's like a regular sales funnel, right? We're trying to go from broadcasting to a lot of people to engaging a smaller amount of people to like really having conversations with only kind of the right people at the right time. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little more about YouTube. And if you don't mind, you should give us the recent thing you did to build some YouTube subscribers.
Yeah, so YouTube is kind of a whole other beast, right? I mean, I remember back in the day, I've had a YouTube channel forever, but it used to just be like the place where I like housed all my videos. Like It was like the old dusty library, right? And I didn't really do anything with it. And you know, like I said, when we launched our Get Social Smart show a few years ago, it was really an eye opener on how different YouTube is from any other social media platform. And I think a big reason for that is YouTube is a search engine. I mean, YouTube is the #2 search engine in the world. It's owned by Google. And we all utilize YouTube much differently than Facebook. You know, for most of us, it's about searching and finding information. We've all done this, right? We got to fix something, or we got to do something. We need some information. So what do? We go to Google, we Google it. And 9 times out of 10, the first few things that come up are YouTube videos, right? And so that's much different than Facebook. Facebook, it's more like, I'm standing in line at Starbucks. I'll click on Facebook. Let me scroll through. Oh, you know, Lee posted a video. Oh, what's that about? Let me click on it and watch it, right? And so it's important in both platforms, but they're different. It's like apples and oranges. And so we find that YouTube makes a big difference just from a searchability standpoint. You know, if you're trying to compete with, you know, the Zillows of the world, or, you know, all the sort of big portals, one of the best ways to differentiate yourself and to get found in kind of the algorithms is through YouTube. And going back to some of the questions you get asked all the time, right? Some of that evergreen content that's relevant not just today, but relevant next week, next month, maybe even next year. And so from a searchability standpoint, I think that's really important. I also think it just helps build your authority. You know, it's really powerful when you can have this library of content, and as you start to get emails, and we get emails all day long from prospects and people who are just interested about, you know, property or whatever it might be. And it's so powerful when you can respond, answer someone's question, and also say, oh, hey, by the way, here's a video and another video link that you might be interested in, that, right, you know, that's about that topic. It adds that sort of layer of credibility. And we've been doing a ton of training about it. We just put out a workbook recently about it, because I'm the kind of person where it's like, just tell me what I need to do, right? Yeah. Like, give me the checklist, give me the links, give me like the step-by-step. And so
it's really good in that sense. I'm a huge fan of it. It's literally like a checklist. It's literally boxes.
Thank you.
You can actually check and do it. And it's funny because I had been focused on growing a YouTube channel as well. And, you know, one other kind of ancillary benefit too is that you can see what people, I mean, I'm shocked sometimes at the ones that actually get good engagement. I made a video on how to do like something in G Suite, which I never thought would be, you know, and it has far and away is the most views I've ever had on anything ever. I still get comments like once a week where somebody's like, hey, can I do it? And I'm like, I had no idea when I was making it. So case in point, it actually helps you kind of see what content is interesting to people.
Yeah.
And you can make it unlisted. You can always, you know, there's different things that you can do. But I think like most of these platforms, right, it's more about doing it, trying it, kind of seeing and finding your own way. I don't think it's fair to expect that anybody on this is going to go do all these things. They're not going to Instagram story and Facebook story and start a YouTube channel and do all those things. But that said, maybe if you're doing one thing really well and you're looking for another thing, and maybe in all this, you know, you can find that. I want to step next into kind of what mistakes you see people make. But is there anything else on you? Well, let's tell the story about what you posted on Facebook to grow your YouTube, or vice versa.
What did I post?
So you posted, sorry, you probably post a lot on Facebook. I can't just be like,
let me think about that
post. Remember that post that you did on Facebook? It was great. No, you posted something recently that said, I think it was a link to your channel, and it said something to the effect of like, hey, drop your link in and I'll follow you back.
Oh, I see. Yes.
And it was great.
Absolutely.
I was like, hey, following me now.
Exactly. Yes. I think that's I think just an example of how we try to build engagement, and it's not just about us, right? So instead of just saying, hey, I'm on YouTube, subscribe, like kind of taking that to the next level of saying, yes, we're on YouTube, and, you know, saying a sentence or two about it, but then saying, hey, are you on YouTube? Drop your link below. Like, let's support each other. And so that's, you know, that's the difference. So if you can kind of think about that philosophy if you're talking about your local community. You know, you might have a great new listing in such and such neighborhood, so you can mention that, but then you might say, what's your favorite part about living in this community? You know, what's your favorite park, or whatever it might be. Like, you know, you kind of turn that around to ask those questions to build that engagement, and that can make a big difference.
For sure. Another great question, asking about YouTube specifically, is interaction possible, or is it more of a one-way kind of platform?
Yeah, interaction is definitely possible. So there's a whole comment section on YouTube. You can actually do YouTube Live, just like Facebook Live. I have not, full disclosure, I've not done a whole lot of that yet, but there's a whole comment section on YouTube. So one of the things that we like to do in our YouTube videos is at the end, we'll ask a really simple question. So it might be like, what do you think? Or, let me know what you think about this or this. It's usually kind of a pretty specific question. And, I'll admit I don't know, probably the first 20 or so videos, it was like nothing. I felt like I am just putting stuff out there. Like, is anybody seeing this? But I just really believed in this idea of it's like a snowball. Like, and it really takes effort. It's like watering a plant. You could water. I just planted seeds last night. I enjoy gardening. I don't have a green thumb, but I enjoy it a little bit, right? So I planted some seeds. And if I just stop watering, like nothing's going to happen. But it takes a few weeks of like water and sunlight. And that's the same thing with YouTube. Probably takes more than a few weeks, but like putting in that effort. So I like to ask questions, and then I actually will put on my calendar. This might sound a little dorky, but I put on my calendar once or twice a week to make sure I go back to YouTube to check my notifications, to check my comments, because for whatever reason, I find that if that's not always on my radar. I see my Facebook comments all the time and Instagram, but YouTube's not always on my radar. So I make sure I'm really intentional about going back, responding to comments. And it's grown over time. I was just on YouTube yesterday. I'm like, holy cow, I had 20 new comments on this one video. Like, so it happens over the course of time for sure.
Right. No, and that's great. And that takes us right into the next segment, which, it's funny. It's one of my bigger pet peeves. And maybe we can talk about this in particular to kind of segue into this, but you're using a good call to action. I mean, like you said, saying at the end of the video, please like and subscribe, or leave a comment if this helped you, or leave a comment if you live in this house, or whatever those things are. That's one of the biggest things that I tend to see is where people, kind of like I said before, like, look at this listing. And people are like, okay, I looked at it. Like, what do you want me to do? Should I tag a friend?
Right.
Should I DM you if I want to go see it? Like, give me some, people do. They need clear direction. So,
yeah. Well, and it goes to what you're talking about here on the screen about mistakes and Asian Spank. And I think this is probably one of the biggest mistakes, especially when someone is a little bit newer to creating content. I will see this all the time, like on a Facebook Live or a video. I'll watch it, and then the end will be like, okay, thanks. Okay, bye. Right? Or the opposite, which is like, hey guys, if you have any questions, you can call me or text me or email me, or I'm on Facebook. Here's a link to my Instagram. I'm also on Twitter. I have a LinkedIn as well, and I'm on YouTube. I think I've got a Pinterest, or you go to my website, right? We give people like 30 things that they could do versus just one or two, like make it really, really, really clear. And a lot of times on these social platforms, it's not even, to go to a website. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just as simple as like, hey, what do you think? Click like, or leave me a comment below, because they're not there yet. Like they're just on Facebook. They're just watching your video, right? They're not ready to like give you all their contact information.
All right. Give me your social. Let's get you
right. Exactly. Kind of some DNA, please. Yeah. So it starts with like those little conversations, and asking. And I love that you said, ask for the subscribe. That's a big thing on YouTube, is which we really learned is during your video saying something like, hey, if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. That way you get notified when we have new videos that come out each and every week. Just asking people to do that, I think, is important. And it's one easy way to grow your subscribers, just by asking.
Yeah, that's great. So what other mistakes do you see? I mean, we don't want to call anybody out, but like what other mistakes do you see people doing, or what are things that people can avoid doing? Let's frame it as positive reinforcement. What should people avoid doing on social?
I think that one of the biggest mistakes is not thinking long-term, and I think we're all kind of guilty of that, where we want results now, and social media can feel really overwhelming, and there's a lot of noise, especially with what's happening right now. And it's easy to be like, oh, like I'm done. Right. But I think really having a long-term philosophy, I think, is really important. I've often said social media is a marathon and not a sprint. And I actually read a really great book about this topic a couple years ago. There's a really great book out called Known, just KNOWN, known. And it's this idea of how long does it take to get known in your industry? And Mark Schaefer, who's a keynote speaker, wrote this book, and it's really fascinating. There's even some real estate examples in there and some other examples. And he talks about this idea of like, for most people, it takes 8 to 12 to maybe even up to 18 months to get known. But what most people do is they stop right before the moment where something's about to happen, right? They do 4 months of video and they get like 2 comments and they're like, this is ridiculous. I'm out. But if they would have just kept with it, like
Right.
2 more
It's like the
months,
mailing, right? You mail one postcard. You're
Yes.
like, nobody called me.
Exactly. I love that example. Exactly. And the people who, yeah, anyone who's done any kind of direct mail or traditional marketing, which I think still can work when done right. Yeah. It's that consistency. It's those little breadcrumbs over the course of time. And so you got to stick with it. You have to have that long-term focus. The same goes with Facebook ads. That's why I said that earlier. I think Facebook ads can work, but you can't just boost a post for 3 days and expect a whole lot of stuff to happen. Like what's your long-term plan? So
Right. For sure. No, that's great. And if people have questions, definitely feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat, whatever's easier. We're keeping an eye on both, but kind of still along those same lines, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about scheduling posts and or using a platform like a Buffer or a Hootsuite or something like that to manage all that. Can you speak just at least high level to kind of recommending that or what not to do or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with scheduling some of your content. I actually set aside a little bit of time once a week. I'm a big believer in time blocking. I've said schedule a few times during this conversation because I really do think if it's not on your schedule, it's not going to happen. And so I like to set aside a little bit of time daily to do engagement and respond to my comments and the whole no tweet left behind. I also will set aside time once a month to do some of that batch creation like we talked about. But then on a weekly basis, I usually like to sit down. For me, it's usually on a Friday, and I'll take a little bit of time to think about the week ahead, right? What's coming up? What are some things? Maybe there's a video that I shared this week that I could post and reshare in a few days, or a Facebook Live, and I could reshare that replay because a lot of people may have missed it, whatever it might be. So I don't think there's anything wrong with scheduling some content. I don't really believe in scheduling months or years in advance. I think we want to be really careful of it, especially right now. There's nothing worse than something happening in the world, and then we see a post come through, and it's like, okay, that was clearly scheduled. That did not mean to happen right now. We've seen big brands who suffered from that. So I've used Hootsuite for years and years. I primarily use Hootsuite for Twitter and LinkedIn. I love it for Twitter because I can set up different searches. I think the search capability in Twitter is really awesome. I love LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great professional network that I'm connected to a lot of people on that I'm not necessarily connected to. Maybe on Facebook, LinkedIn's great for executives and folks who don't really want to be on Facebook or Instagram. So I use Hootsuite for that. For Facebook, I find that Facebook likes when you stay on Facebook, right? It's like what I said earlier. If you're going to put video, upload it directly to Facebook. So with a Facebook business page or a group, there are scheduling capabilities just right within Facebook. So we do have a private Facebook group for our Academy members. I'll go in from time to time, maybe schedule a post here and there. I'll do the same thing on my Facebook business page. I might schedule a few posts for the next couple days. So, there's a couple things I recommend. I've also been using a tool for Instagram I really like called Later.com. It's great. There's a free version. There's also a paid version. I particularly like it because it has a great desktop version, and Instagram on your desktop is pretty awful. There's not a whole lot you can do on your computer, but Later is a great place to be able to upload video or upload content and really type out thoughtful captions, save hashtags, things like that. The last little thing I'll mention just about scheduling is I would just really encourage people right now to really think about automation in terms of, you want to be careful with automation. I don't think there's anything wrong with smart automation, but I think we want to be careful of just automating everything. And this goes back to, your slide here about mistakes that I see. This is a big mistake that's still happening where agents are like, I don't have time for this, so I'm going to pay for so-and-so company to do this. I'm going to pay for somebody to do it for me. And I get it, but at the same time, it's almost like the lights are on, but nobody's home, and there's this disconnect, and it's not authentic. I mean, social media is social, right? So those are just a few things I'd recommend.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I appreciate you saying that because it's not set it and forget it. It's not that is literally not the point. But that's where I'm a fan potentially of scheduling stuff just a little ways out.
Yeah,
and being prepared to engage with it. So it's not so much that you have to remember to post and then find the picture and then do the right thing and then engage with people. It's like, okay, well, I can sit down and figure out, the post when I have time to figure out the post, but be better prepared to engage with it when it happens. But that's really good advice. And if people have questions, I mean, this is a great opportunity to ask Katie, whatever you want about social media. I think, we'll just keep moving into, I think you had a couple of book recommendations. So if people have questions, just drop them in.
Yeah.
We will make sure everybody gets the recording. But yeah, tell us a little bit about some of your book recommendations.
Yeah, these are two of my latest favorite books. I had the opportunity to actually interview both these authors on my podcast, so it's a shameless plug for my podcast, right? But but these two folks are great. Ron Tite is someone I met about a year or two ago. He's an amazing speaker, literally one of the best speakers I've ever seen. And he wrote this book about, it's called Think, Do, Say, and it's this idea of brands and marketers. The great brands that we know, it's what they think, it's what they do, and then it's what they actually say. And, we've seen a lot of brands do this well. We've seen a lot of brands not do this well, but I love it. He's got some great stories that'll make you laugh. It's a really easy read. And I think for anyone who's trying to build a brand or just get better about branding, get better about marketing, and maybe you're using this time right now to kind of just, sharpen your saw a little bit. It's a fantastic read. And then Melanie Diesel, she's amazing. She's also a great speaker. And she wrote a book this year that came out right before the pandemic. And she was joking to me. She's like, okay, it may not be the best time to launch a book, right? When a pandemic starts, but it's awesome. She wrote a book called The Content Fuel Framework. And if you we've been talking a lot about content today. And if you're trying to get like your arms around, like, what does a content strategy look like? What does it actually look like to repurpose content, not just like post the same thing 12 different places? She like walks through like her strategy for when she works with clients. And it's very much like a great how-to guide. So again, if you're like me, who's like, just tell me how to do it, it's a great framework for that. So both of those, I think, are just really good recommendations.
That's great. And that's funny. That actually reminded me of something as well that is another great way to, think of more content, or just kind of, it's really all about who you follow and who you're connected with as far as what you see. So be sure that you're following some people who are doing, maybe a few notches ahead of you.
Yeah.
You don't have to do exactly what they're doing, but just to get a feel for, how much real estate are they posting versus personal? How much, specific, what hashtags are they using? Just things like that aren't, they are little, but they're not. And, don't copy somebody exactly, but that could be a good way conceptually to think of additional content as you go. And I think if it's okay with you, I think we talked about sharing out your content grid with the group.
Yeah.
Which, can you tell us a little bit about what the content grid is, just so that when people get a hold of that, they know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So we created this grid, really. We called it the content grid many years ago. And some of you who are listening might have downloaded it back in the day. It's something I don't know, tens of thousands of agents over the years have downloaded it. And basically, it's a really simple spreadsheet with about 30 content ideas. And so the idea is, when you think about content, you think about social media, this all sounds great, but then you sit down and you're like, what am I supposed to say? Like, what did you say?
Blank piece of paper thing.
Exactly. So it's this idea of like, okay, here are some ideas to kind of jumpstart your creativity. And to be honest, a lot of agents and brokers are like print it out. I've seen agents who have like the bulletin boards on their desk. They'll like pin it to the wall right there.
Right.
And the idea is when you're sitting down to schedule content, post content, create content, you've got some ideas. And it's broken up into like 5 different sections. It's local real estate, national real estate, home and design, personal interest, and community. So it's kind of generic enough where anybody could be like, oh, I could borrow this idea, I could borrow that idea. But we have a lot of folks who are like, oh, I'm going to kind of tweak it a little bit, make it more personal, which is awesome. So yeah, if someone just goes to my website, katielance.com/content grid, katielance.com/content grid, and I can drop the link in the chat if you'd like.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And we have one great question, then we'll wrap because I want to respect people's time. But a really great question for new agents that currently don't have a lot of traffic or transactions. What type of content would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say for someone who doesn't have a whole lot of transactions or listing, I really think community content is great. I would say community content, but also real estate content. So community content in the sense of like, where's the best place to get a slice of pizza? What's the best place to get a great cup of coffee? Talking maybe a little bit about the local school districts. What are your top favorite parks? Like, this idea of kind of, really mastering your community, I think is important. But then I would also think about, are there some real estate topics that you can talk about that are somewhat evergreen, right? So it might be like your top 3 moving mistakes, or the 5 things every first-time home buyer needs to think about, or should you rent or should you buy? How do you know? How to find a lender? Like, how do you find a realtor? Like, oh, so again, kind of back to those questions you get asked all the time, especially if you don't have a listing right now or you're not working with anyone specifically right now. That's a great place to start.
That's great. I would also argue that, for people in that position, I think one great advantage that they have is that they kind of aren't super immersed in all the lingo and all the acronyms and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
you are actually in kind of a unique position to speak the consumer's language a little bit before you get all wrapped up in the business, the industry side of things. Like, what things were you wondering about real estate? And you don't have to say that you're new, but like, what
Yeah.
things were you wondering about real estate before you got in? And how is it different now that you're kind of in it, like
Totally. And
that would be
kind of
really
sharing your
interesting.
journey, like sharing, saying, I'm going to take you guys along on this journey, and
Right.
why I got into real estate and why I love what I love about it. And, as I'm learning, I mean, it goes back to the sort of taking people along with you. And I think people resonate with that, in a big
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. That's awesome. So if people want to connect with you, katielance.com, that's the
Yeah.
home base for everything,
That's
right?
the best one. I'm gonna drop that in the chat so you guys can have that too. And I drop my Instagram in there. I'm definitely active on all social medias, but these days I feel like I'm especially active over on Instagram. So
And I want to challenge everybody who's on here, if they're not connected with you, or even if they are, they should leave a comment. They should test out your no tweet or no comment left behind. They should say,
please
"Hey, I saw
do.
you on the webinar today, and
Yep.
it was great." So I would
Yes,
I would
please
challenge
do
everybody
that.
on to do that.
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
good.
Take out your phone and send me a message on Facebook or Instagram, or tag me in a post. Absolutely. I'll be hopping on social media, and I would love to connect with any of you who are watching this live.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie, for being on. So much good information, and we really, really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And just thank you to everyone who's here. I always think that the greatest gift you can give someone is your presence. So I appreciate everyone for being here today.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it pays to refer. Get up to $120 for you and your clients. For details, visit gng.com/gngHub. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit the Hub for more materials, the recording from this session, as well as additional resources to help spark your business's success. You can visit bit.ly/GNGYT to visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And again, visit gng.com/GNGHub to become a member for free today.